Cairo, Egypt, February 14th, 1953. The band is loud, the room thick with smoke, and the Kit Kat nightclub is packed with men who don't like to talk about the war. On stage, a French singer named Monique Dubois locks eyes with a retired German guest in the VIP suite. But tonight's champagne isn't a celebration, it's a timer. In her glove seam is a tiny paper packet, stamped C2. In 48 hours, one man will be dead, and the woman who poured his drink will already be back in London, smiling for a passport photo. This is Operation Sandglass. Cairo in late 1952 is a city with a hangover and a new spine. King Farouk is gone. The free officers movement has taken control. The old order has cracked, and the new one is still deciding what rules it will bend. Foreign intelligence services treat the city like a chessboard, because the stakes are regional, not local. The Suez Canal remains the lifeline between Europe and Asia. Cold War influence hangs over every negotiation, and everyone in the room is counting leverage. American diplomats are already negotiating defense arrangements and British withdrawal problems with Egypt's new leadership. British intelligence knows their time in Egypt is running out. They need to clean up unfinished business before the window closes completely. Cairo has always had places where leverage is traded quietly. Nightclubs, hotel bars, houseboats on the Nile. The Kit Kat isn't just nightlife. It's a meeting point where money, nostalgia, and secrets overlap. During World War II, Cairo's nightlife circuit was an intelligence marketplace. British, German, and Free French operatives used the same venues. Performers were recruited as couriers. Bartenders passed messages. The Kit Kat survived the war and the revolution. It remained a place where foreigners could drink, dance, and pretend the world outside wasn't changing. That continuity made it operationally valuable. If you wanted to approach someone without raising suspicion, you didn't do it in an embassy. You did it where everyone was already watching everyone else. Into this setting steps the operative. Her real name is Elizabeth Thornton, late 20s, MI6 case officer, built for languages, mimicry, and patience. Her defining skill isn't seduction, it's control under repetition. The ability to perform the same lie 6 nights a week without drifting off script. She studied theater at Cambridge before recruitment. She speaks French with a Parisian accent that can slide toward Marseille when she wants to sound working class. She can hold a note, which matters when your cover is a nightclub singer. But the skill that made her right for this operation is something else. Handlers call it emotional compartmentalization, the ability to simulate intimacy without feeling it, to smile at someone you're planning to kill and mean the smile in that moment, then walk away and sleep soundly. Thornton joined MI6 in 1949. Her first posting was Paris. She ran cutout operations against Soviet trade delegations. Her second posting was Beirut, where she practiced identity construction under operational pressure. By 1952, she had logged 463 hours of undercover work. None of it violent, all of it psychological. Her assessment file described her as operationally cold and personally invisible, the highest compliment in the intelligence community. In September 1952, she was recalled to London for briefing. The target, Otto Brandt. The method, close proximity termination. The timeline, 3 months. Otto Brandt is the name used in the operational account. Whether that was his real name or another cover is unknown. What is known, he was a logistics officer in the Wehrmacht during World War II. His specialty was supply chain coordination for Eastern Front operations. That means he organized the movement of food, fuel, ammunition, and personnel through occupied Poland and Ukraine. It also means he organized the logistical infrastructure that supported SS operations in those territories. Rail schedules, fuel allocations, warehouse inventories. The machinery of genocide doesn't run itself. Someone ensures the trains arrive on time. Someone ensures the camps have the supplies they need. Brandt was that someone. After the war, Brandt disappeared. Allied intelligence lost him somewhere in Austria in late 1945. He resurfaced in Damascus in 1948 under a different name. By 1951, he was in Cairo. Egyptian intelligence had recruited him as an advisor. The new government wanted to professionalize its security apparatus. They needed expertise, European expertise. Brandt offered logistics and counterintelligence experience. He trained Egyptian officers in surveillance detection and operational security. He didn't advertise his background, but he didn't need to. The Egyptians knew who they were hiring. They hired him anyway. MI6 had tracked Brandt since Damascus. Extradition was impossible. Egypt wasn't going to hand over an advisor they were actively using. A public accusation would embarrass the new government and damage British-Egyptian relations at a moment when London was negotiating military withdrawal terms. A trial in absentia would be symbolic, but operationally meaningless. So MI6 doctrine shifted to the alternative. If extradition is impossible and exposure risks diplomatic rupture, you don't arrest. You neutralize. The authorization came from the Joint Intelligence Committee in November 1952. Method: close proximity termination using non-attributable means. Timeframe: before March 1953, when Brandt was scheduled to transfer to a new posting outside Cairo. The obstacles were brutal. Brandt lived inside social camouflage. He attended nightclubs, restaurants, and private gatherings with Egyptian security officers. He was always surrounded by people who would notice something wrong. Egyptian counterintelligence provided informal protection, not bodyguards, just awareness. They knew foreign services wanted him. They watched for surveillance. A direct approach would be detected immediately. An abduction would trigger an international incident. A shooting would be investigated by Egyptian police, who might trace it back to British intelligence. The method had to be quiet, delayed, and deniable. It had to look natural. And it had to happen in a space where Thornton could get close without arousing suspicion. The Kit Kat nightclub provided that space. Brandt was a regular. He attended twice a week, always on Tuesdays and Saturdays. He sat in the VIP section. He drank French cognac. He tipped well. He watched the performers with the careful attention of someone trained to notice details. He never stayed late. He never got drunk. He never brought guests. The pattern was consistent. Consistency creates opportunity. If you know where someone will be and when, you can engineer proximity. The problem: Brandt wasn't looking for company. He was looking for threats. Any approach that felt scripted would trigger his training. The approach had to feel accidental, inevitable, and emotionally genuine. That's why the operation required a performer. MI6 doesn't send a spy into a club. It manufactures a person the club would hire. Thornton became Monique Dubois, with a paper trail designed to survive casual scrutiny. A French passport issued in Casablanca in 1949. A travel history that explains her accent drift. Work history: performer at Le Chat Noir in Tangier, then Hotel Mamounia in Marrakech. References from 2 club managers, both fictional but backed by telephone numbers that reached MI6 cutouts. A booking letter from a European impresario operating out of Geneva. The letter was genuine. The impresario was real. He just didn't know he'd signed it. The legend had a built-in flaw on purpose. One small inconsistency that could be confessed to feel human, not perfect. In her case, a forged work permit from Tangier that listed the wrong date range. If someone checked closely, they'd catch it. Then she'd admit it with embarrassment and explain she was desperate for work. Vulnerability builds trust. The operation entered execution phase on December 20th, 1952. Thornton arrived in Cairo on December 23rd. She moved into safe flat K17, a rented apartment in Doki, 2 kilometers from the Kit Kat. The flat was stocked with wardrobe duplicates. 3 identical black evening gowns, 2 sets of gloves, spare stage makeup. A shortwave radio set was hidden inside a hollowed-out phonograph cabinet. Transmission windows were pre-arranged. Tuesdays, 0210 to 0214 hours, using one-time pad encryption. No other communication was permitted. A cutout courier, known only as Mr. H, handled cash and costume deliveries. He never entered the flat. He left packages at a dead drop inside a bookshop on Qasr El Nil Street. Thornton retrieved them during her market runs. Surveillance detection became part of her daily routine. 2 routes alternated randomly. Route 1, walking through the Khan El Khalili market at different tempos, pausing at stalls to check reflections in brass mirrors. Route 2, taxi from Doki to Zamalek with intentional wrong turns. If the driver corrected her, he was a driver. If he followed instructions without question, he might be surveillance. She ran these routes every other day for 3 weeks before the first approach. Paranoia is tradecraft. Assumption is death. The Kit Kat hired Monique Dubois on January 4th, 1953. The audition was brief. Thornton sang 2 songs in French. 1 Edith Piaf standard, 1 Josephine Baker number. The club manager asked if she could do 6 nights a week. She said yes. He offered 40 Egyptian pounds per week. She negotiated to 50. She needed to appear professional, not desperate. Desperation raises questions. The contract started January 7th. Opening night was a Tuesday. Otto Brandt was in the audience. Thornton's first set began at 22:30 hours. 3 songs. She wore the black gown, elbow-length gloves, minimal jewelry. Her voice was competent but not extraordinary. That was intentional. Exceptional talent draws attention. Attention means scrutiny. She needed to be good enough to justify the booking, but unremarkable enough to blend into the venue's atmosphere. Between songs, she scanned the room. The VIP section was elevated, separated by a velvet rope. 4 tables, 3 occupied. Brandt sat alone at the corner table, smoking a Turkish cigarette. Watching her with the same detached attention he gave the waitstaff. He didn't applaud after the songs. He didn't react visibly. But his eyes didn't leave her. After the set, Thornton returned to the dressing room. She changed gloves. The first pair had absorbed too much stage sweat. She reapplied lipstick. She counted to 100. Then she walked through the service corridor toward the main floor. This route took her past the VIP section entrance. At precisely 23:27 hours, she reached the corridor just as Brandt was leaving. She didn't look at him directly. She glanced, then looked away. He paused. She continued walking. He didn't follow. Phase 1 complete. He had noticed her noticing him. Over the next 2 weeks, Thornton established a pattern. She performed 6 nights per week, Monday through Saturday. 2 sets per night, 22:30 and 00:30 hours. She never approached the VIP section. She never made eye contact with Brandt during her performances. But after the second set, she always walked through that corridor at approximately 00:27 hours. Sometimes Brandt was there. Sometimes he wasn't. When he was, she never stopped. She simply passed, occasionally glancing in his direction, occasionally not. The repetition built familiarity, without intention. It looked accidental because it was consistent. Complications arrived on January 14th. A club manager named Fawzi started asking questions. Why did she leave Tangier? Did she have family in Cairo? Could she provide Egyptian references? Thornton answered each question with a mix of truth and vulnerability. She left Tangier because the club closed. She had no family. She could provide references from Marrakesh, but would need time to contact them. Fawzi didn't push, but he didn't stop watching. 2 nights later, a drunk ex-officer recognized a melody from Berlin. He shouted something in German about the song being performed at a cabaret near Alexanderplatz in 1941. Thornton smiled, said she'd learned it from a record, and moved to the next song. The moment passed, but it was a warning. Every detail could betray her. The breakthrough came on January 21st. Thornton's second set ended at 00:43 hours. She returned to the dressing room. When she emerged, she found Brandt standing near the service corridor, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He offered one. She accepted. They spoke for 4 minutes. He asked where she learned to sing. She said Casablanca, then Tangier, now here. He asked if she liked Cairo. She said it was complicated, then changed the subject by asking about his accent. He smiled but didn't answer. She didn't push. The conversation ended naturally. She excused herself, citing an early morning appointment. He nodded. She left. Phase 2 complete. He had initiated contact. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern continued. Short conversations after the second set, never longer than 5 minutes. Topics were superficial. The weather, the club's atmosphere, her opinion on Egyptian music. Brandt never revealed personal information. He never asked invasive questions. He was testing her the same way she was testing him. Each conversation was a surveillance detection drill. Any inconsistency would end the operation. Thornton maintained absolute precision. She remembered every detail she'd mentioned previously. She never contradicted herself. She never overperformed enthusiasm. She remained professionally polite, subtly warm, but never desperate for his attention. On February 3rd, Brandt requested a private celebration. He approached Thornton after her set and asked if she would join him for a drink on Valentine's Day. Not in the main room, in the VIP suite. No staff, just friends. He framed it as a birthday celebration. He was turning 56. He wanted something quiet. She hesitated, then agreed. The hesitation was calculated. Too quick and it looks planned. Too slow and it looks suspicious. The execution window was now defined. February 14th, 1953. 12 days to prepare. MI6 provided the termination agent through a diplomatic pouch on February 6th. The package was labeled medical supplies and addressed to the British Embassy's health attaché. Inside, a pharmaceutical-grade compound coded C2, stored in a glass vial no larger than a lipstick tube. The compound was tasteless, odorless, and delayed action. Effects manifested between 48 and 72 hours after ingestion. Symptoms mimicked cardiac arrest. An autopsy would reveal tissue degradation consistent with natural myocardial infarction. The dose required was minimal, 0.03 grams dissolved in liquid. The vial contained 0.15 grams, enough for 5 doses. Thornton received the package at the dead drop on February 7th. She transferred the contents into a paper packet no larger than a postage stamp. The packet was stitched into the seam of her left glove. February 14th, 1953. Thornton arrived at the Kit Kat at 21:45 hours. She performed her first set at 22:30. The room was crowded. Valentine's Day brought couples, tourists, and regulars. Brandt sat in his usual spot, alone, watching. She didn't acknowledge him during the performance. After the set, she returned to the dressing room. She removed the packet from her left glove and transferred it to a folded handkerchief inside her handbag. She reapplied lipstick. She counted to 200. At 23:58 hours, she left through the service corridor. The VIP suite was a small room behind the main section. Private entrance, lockable door. 2 chairs, a low table, and a window overlooking the street. Brandt was already inside. 2 glasses of champagne sat on the table. He had poured them himself. This was the vulnerability. He wanted privacy, but privacy meant no neutral witnesses. Thornton entered, smiled, and closed the door. She sat across from him. She complimented the gesture. He thanked her. They spoke for 3 minutes about nothing important. The weather, the noise from the street, whether the champagne was French or local. At 009 hours, she asked if she could pour fresh glasses. The champagne had warmed, she said. He agreed. She stood, moved to the side table where the bottle rested, and turned her back to him. This was the critical moment. She retrieved the handkerchief from her handbag, unfolded it with one hand, and opened the packet inside. The compound was powdered. She tapped it into his glass. The motion was disguised by the handkerchief's movement, as if she were blotting lipstick or adjusting her hair. She folded the handkerchief, placed it on the table, and poured fresh champagne into both glasses. Total elapsed time, 43 seconds. At 0011 hours, she returned to the table. She handed him his glass. She raised hers. She toasted him using the same phrase she'd used on stage earlier, to those who know how to live quietly. He smiled. They drank. The compound dissolved instantly. It had no taste, no odor, no visible trace. Brandt continued talking. He asked if she planned to stay in Cairo. She said she didn't know. It depended on the work. He suggested she might consider singing in Beirut. Better audiences, he said. Better pay. She smiled and said she'd think about it. At 0013 hours, Thornton did not leave. This is the critical tradecraft. Panic is the tell. If she rushed to exit, Brandt's training would recognize it as flight behavior. So she stayed. They talked for another 17 minutes. She asked about his work. He deflected. She didn't push. She mentioned wanting to visit the pyramids. He said they were worth seeing once. The conversation was forgettable. That was the point. At 0030 hours, she glanced at her watch and apologized. She had an early rehearsal in the morning. He understood. She thanked him for the evening. He walked her to the door. They said goodnight. She exited through the club's main entrance, not the service corridor. She walked 3 blocks south, hailed a taxi, and returned to safe flat K17. By 0115 hours, Thornton had changed clothes, packed her travel documents, and burned the glove containing the empty packet. By 0330 hours, she was aboard a British military transport flight departing from Cairo West Air Base. The flight manifest listed her as civilian contractor Elizabeth Harmon, returning to London after administrative consultation. By 0612 hours, she was airborne over the Mediterranean. By 1400 hours, she was in a debriefing room in London, describing a death she hadn't yet witnessed. Otto Brandt collapsed on February 16, 1953, at approximately 1530 hours. He was at a cafe near Tahrir Square with 2 Egyptian intelligence officers. Witnesses reported he stood to leave, paused, touched his chest, and fell. An ambulance arrived within 12 minutes. He was pronounced dead en route to the hospital. The official cause: acute myocardial infarction. He was 56 years old. The Egyptian government issued a brief statement acknowledging the death of a foreign consultant. No further details were provided. The funeral was private. The body was buried in Cairo's European cemetery under his cover name. Egyptian intelligence understood what had happened immediately, not because they had evidence, because they recognized the signature. A foreign national dies suddenly, days after private contact with a performer who vanished from Cairo the same night. The method was invisible, but the message was clear. Someone had reached inside Egypt's security apparatus and removed an asset without leaving a trace. The humiliation was strategic. If they admitted suspicion, they admitted vulnerability. If they investigated publicly, they risked exposing their relationship with a former Wehrmacht officer. So they remained silent. But the silence carried weight. Within a week, Egyptian counterintelligence increased surveillance on expatriate venues. Nightclub owners faced sudden license inspections. Performers were required to register with the Interior Ministry. The Kit Kat's manager was questioned about Monique Dubois. He provided her contract, her audition notes, and her references. All of it checked out superficially. But she disappeared without collecting her final payment. That detail alone suggested operational discipline. The Egyptians flagged her passport. If Elizabeth Thornton ever returned to Egypt under any name, she'd be detained at the border. But they never confirmed her real identity. MI6 had compartmentalized the operation effectively. Even if Egyptian intelligence suspected British involvement, they couldn't prove it. For MI6, the assessment was straightforward. The operation had achieved its primary objective. A high-value target with direct connection to wartime atrocities had been neutralized without diplomatic incident, extradition proceedings, or trial complications. The secondary benefit was deterrence. Other former Nazis operating in the Middle East now understood that Cold War alliances wouldn't guarantee protection from post-war justice. The cost was calculable. Relations with Egyptian intelligence deteriorated slightly, but not catastrophically. The broader British withdrawal from Egypt continued on schedule. No intelligence officers were expelled. No diplomatic protests were filed. The operation remained unacknowledged by all parties. The cost landed where it always lands, on the human asset. Elizabeth Thornton returned to London and entered a mandatory 6-week stand-down period. She attended psychological evaluations every 72 hours. The evaluations focused on what handlers call legend drift, the psychological blurring that occurs when false identity feels more real than the original. During one session, Thornton described a recurring dream. She was on stage at the Kit Kat, performing for an empty room. She could hear applause but couldn't see the audience. When she turned to leave, the stage door was locked. The evaluator noted signs of operational fatigue but deemed her fit for continued service. Thornton requested a desk assignment. The request was denied. She was reassigned to Vienna in April 1953. She served there for 2 years before requesting permanent resignation from field operations. Her file contains no explanation for the decision. She transitioned to analytical work at MI6 headquarters and remained in that capacity until retirement in 1971. She never returned to Cairo. She never performed publicly again. In a post-retirement interview conducted for internal training purposes, she was asked if she experienced moral conflict about the operation. Her answer was documented verbatim. The moral question isn't whether he deserved it. The moral question is whether I deserve to become the person who delivered it. Cairo remained an intelligence crossroads throughout the 1950s and 60s. The Kit Kat continued operating until 1964, when it closed during a broader crackdown on foreign-owned nightclubs. Former Nazis continued to surface across the Middle East, working as military advisors, engineers, and consultants for governments that valued their expertise more than their history. Some were eventually extradited. Some were assassinated by Israeli intelligence. Some lived quietly and died naturally. Otto Brandt was one name in a long list. The operation that ended him was neither the first nor the last of its kind. The moral paradox remains unresolved. One perspective argues that Brandt was a war criminal who escaped justice through geographical luck and political convenience. He participated in logistics systems that enabled mass murder. When legal mechanisms failed to hold him accountable, extrajudicial action became the only available remedy. Justice delayed is justice denied, and Operation Sandglass delivered the sentence history couldn't. The other perspective argues that when intelligence services replace courts, they also replace truth. There was no trial, no defense, no opportunity for Brandt to present evidence or challenge accusations. The state became judge, jury, and executioner. That precedent doesn't end with guilty men. It expands. It escalates. It becomes a tool for eliminating anyone a government deems inconvenient. The uncomfortable question isn't whether Brandt deserved to die. The uncomfortable question is whether you're comfortable with a system that decides who deserves to die without ever having to prove it. If you knew with certainty that Brandt would never face trial, that diplomatic realities, Cold War politics, and Egyptian self-interest made justice impossible, would you approve of MI6 killing him anyway? Or is that the exact moment justice transforms into something else entirely? Something that looks like revenge, sounds like necessity, but operates without accountability, transparency, or the possibility of error correction? What's your take? If evidence is classified, witnesses are dead, and courts are impossible, does assassination become justice? Or does it just become murder with better paperwork? Drop your perspective in the comments. And if this story made you question where the line between justice and revenge actually exists, hit that like button. Because this operation isn't just history. It's a question we're still answering.